Skill 7. Listen for negative expressions. A negative sentence expresses the absence of an activity, the conclusion of an object, or the lack of a specific quality in the subject. Besides, negative sentence is defined as a statement that means no, an act of refusing to do something or of denying something. Most of the time, it can be recognized by the terms not, no, nobody, nothing, nowhere, no one, and none. The most common way to create a negative sentence is to simply add the word not to the statement's verb. Additionally, it is the simplest approach to spot a bad sentence. However, there are different techniques for creating and recognizing negative phrases. Traditionally, adding a not to the verb signifies that no action is occurring. There are a few things you should be aware of even when doing this. When to be and do verb forms are used as main verbs, the word not can be placed right after the verb. For example, she's not an instructor. I don't like sweet things. You can also use words like nothing, nowhere, none, nobody, and no one to create negative statements. For example, in the auditorium, no one had gathered. Nobody's thoughts on the recently put into effect policies had been solicited. This skill is based on identifying negative statements, which are common, and selecting the answer that has the positive way of the sentence but with an opposite meaning. This is usually utilized in this test. You must know how to identify the negative statements. On the recording, you hear, "Man, Jose is no sad today." Narrator: what does the man imply? The letter A is the right response since it symbolizes the opposite of what is assumed to be Jose's current state of feeling. Skill 11. Listen for expressions of agreement. In every language, everyone engages in daily discourse that includes agreeing and disagreeing. Simply said, to agree with someone is to recognize their viewpoint, declaration, or course of action. Contrarily, disagreeing is the opposite of agreeing since it begins with the prefix dis, which stands for not, the opposite of. Now, if you want to make agreeing and disagreeing easy, you must learn some expressions are essential. For example, agreement with positive statements like, "So do I," "Me too," "I'll say," etc., and agreement with negative statements like "Neither do I" and "I don't either." This skill is based on since the expressions of agreement are common in short dialogues. Many questions can be answered if you understand how they work. You must know how to identify the different expressions of agreement and disagreement that exist. On the recording, you hear, first, positive statements. Man: I think that the hypothesis is indefensible. Woman: so do I. Narrator: what does the woman mean? So do I is a phrase used to express agreement with a positive statement, so the woman is expressing her agreement with the man. Therefore, choice D is the optimal response. To indicate agreement with a negative assertion, several terms are used. In the second example, you hear, now, let's check the negative statements. Woman: I don't think that our history teacher is very interesting. Man: neither do I. Narrator: what does the man mean? The phrase, "neither do I," indicates agreement with a negative statement, indicating that the man shares the woman's viewpoint. Therefore, choice C is the optimal response. The popular phrases that demonstrate agreement are included in the accompanying chart. You need to become used to these idioms. Skill 16. Listen for 2- and 3-part verbs. Phrasal verbs are combinations of 2 or more words that function as a single new verb having a distinct meaning from the original ones. For instance, pick up is considerably different from the definitions of pick and up alone in that it indicates to grab or hoist. Phrasal verbs can be very difficult to understand because there are so many of them and their definitions aren't always obvious. It can be confusing because many of the base verbs that are used to create phrasal verbs are really utilized to create numerous phrasal verbs with various meanings. A phrasal verb creates a totally new verbal phrase by combining a regular verb with an adverb or preposition, known as the particle of the phrasal verb. Phrasal verbs behave similarly to other verbs in terms of conjugation and placement when they are used in a phrase, but they do have unique grammatical restrictions affecting word order. Take the phrasal verb, get over, as an illustration. The preposition over alone typically denotes being higher than or moving over something, whereas the verb gain alone indicates to acquire. This skill based on these kinds of verbs are called phrasal verbs. They are followed by an adjective, adverb, etc., like call, can be accompanied with off, making it call off, which does not mean calling somebody but means cancel. You must learn to identify this type of phrasal verbs. On the recording, you hear, man, what time does the meeting start? Woman, didn't you hear that it was called off by the director? Narrator, what does the woman say about the meeting? The two-part word called off in this question differs from the verb call, which refers to a phone. The best response is response, D, as the two-part verb call off indicates to cancel. After watching this video, you can move on to the practice section by following the skills mentioned in the video.